My name is Elijah, a 12-year-old black boy living on the south side of Chicago. Growing up in this neighborhood, I quickly learned that the world was unfair. I wasn't born with hatred, but over time, I felt like the whole world was against me, and white people were part of that injustice. I used to think that even God was on their side. If He loved everyone, why was my life so hard? Why did people like me struggle every day while white kids had it easier? I used to doubt whether God was truly fair or if He even cared about me. But if I told you that everything I believed in was shattered in an instant, would you believe me? If I told you that my death opened my eyes to a completely different truth, would you dare listen? I saw Him. I stood before Jesus, and in that moment, all my burdens, all my resentments, all my hatreds melted away like mist before the sunlight. I thought I understood the world, but standing before Him, I realized how wrong I was. Listen to my story until the end, because it may change the way you see things. Before my near-death experience, my life was nothing but darkness. At school, teachers seemed to be just waiting to find fault in kids like me. A small mistake was enough to get me punished, while white children only received a gentle reminder. When I walked into a store, I could feel the suspicious stares of the staff, as if I were about to steal something. And the police? They weren't there to protect us. They were there to control us. I had seen my older brother shoved into a patrol car by the police, simply for walking home too late. I had seen my friends being frisked on the street just because they were standing in the wrong place. Even in church, a place that should have been full of love and equality, I felt the discrimination. White children were seated in the front rows, closest to the pastor, while we were pushed to the back. They were seen, heard, and cared for, while we were nothing more than silent shadows. I once asked my mother why it was like that, and she simply said, "That's just how things have always been." But I could not accept it. If God loves everyone, why were we treated differently? I learned the survival rule at a very young age. Bow your head, don't draw attention, don't give them a reason. Yet, even when I did everything right, I still felt like I was seen as a criminal in their eyes. Those experiences gradually became deeply ingrained in my mind. I wasn't born with hatred, but I couldn't ignore what I had witnessed. I began to believe that they would never see me as an equal. And when that truth seeped into my very blood, it left behind something I never wanted to admit: resentment. I didn't want to hate them, but I couldn't stop that feeling. I couldn't forgive the contemptuous looks, the prejudiced words, the subtle acts of discrimination that followed me throughout my life. And then, one day, I died. A near-death experience far more horrifying than anything I had ever imagined. In that moment, when I saw the truth, I wanted to fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness for everything I had ever thought about them. For all my faith was wiped away in just an instant. That night, I was on a routine drug drop, a risk I took every day to survive. I carried a small package of contraband, expecting nothing unusual, but as I turned the corner, red and blue lights exploded into view and sirens filled the air like a warning. In that instant, everything unraveled. Someone had tipped off the police. The moment I was detected, I bolted into the maze of dark alleys. My lungs burned as I sprinted through narrow passageways, vaulting over fences and dodging obstacles. Behind me, shouts, pounding footsteps, and the relentless bark of a police dog merged into one terrifying sound. In that frantic rush, escape was all I could think about. Then, in a blur of motion, fate struck. A violent crash shattered the chaos. Suddenly, silence replaced the sirens and shouts, and I felt as if I were suspended in nothingness. There was no cold or heat, only an eerie calm, as if my body had been left behind. When consciousness returned, it did so with brutal clarity. I looked down in horror. My body lay twisted on the pavement, broken beyond recognition. A crowd had gathered quickly. Amid gasps and frantic phone taps, a desperate cry rang out, "Elijah!" It was my mother, her voice raw with terror as she fought through the onlookers. I longed to reach out, but my voice was gone, and my hands felt like mere wisps of smoke. In that suspended moment between life and death, a profound question gripped me. Was I really gone? Floating in that silent void, I felt time slow until a light appeared, different from the flashing ambulance beams. This light pulsed with warmth and gentle power, beckoning me forward without force. Then he emerged from the glow. In that instant, I knew I was facing something far beyond the earthly realm. His robe shimmered like woven light, and his eyes overflowed with a love so vast it made my soul tremble. I stood frozen, overwhelmed by the realization that I had long believed he was absent, that he had forsaken me, my family, and the hard streets I once roamed. Yet there he was, an embodiment of compassion and mercy. A crushing shame washed over me as I recalled every misstep, turning away from grace, cursing his name in despair, risking everything in a world of contraband, betraying a mother who sacrificed all for me. In that moment, I felt utterly unworthy. Tears blurred my vision as I sank to my knees, not out of fear, but in acknowledgement of my true state. A heavy silence fell between us until, softly, he spoke my name. Elijah. That single word reverberated deep within me, stirring emotions I had long suppressed. In a voice barely above a whisper, I managed, I don't deserve to be here." He stepped closer, enveloping me in a warmth that was more than a mere embrace. "You have always been mine," he said calmly, his words gently breaking down the walls built by years of rejection and pain. In that moment, every sneer and every moment of despair melted away, replaced by the undeniable truth that I was not forgotten and never truly alone. The burden of years, the constant battle against a world that saw me as a criminal, a lost soul, crashed down. My shoulders shook as tears flowed freely, washing away the accumulated sorrow. I realized then that every scar, every mistake, had led me to this encounter of redemption. He knelt before me, his eyes full of infinite compassion, and touched my shoulder with a healing, unfiltered love that lifted the crushing weight of guilt and loneliness. Though my past remained, the pain began to ease. Looking up, my voice trembled as I asked, "But why? Why me?" His soft, reassuring smile and steady gaze spoke of mysteries beyond words. "You are not alone, Elijah," he replied. "There is more for you to see." In that moment, I felt a gentle pull, a quiet invitation toward a destiny I'd never imagined. I sensed that whatever lay ahead would forever alter my life. My near-death experience was not an end, but the beginning of a profound journey toward healing, redemption, and purpose. Every regret, every scar began to fade, replaced by hope and belonging. The chains of judgment and shame were breaking, giving way to a future illuminated by his light. I knew my life would never be the same. I had been granted a second chance, a chance to rise above the darkness that had defined me. I was seen, loved, and destined for something far greater than the cruelty of the world I once knew. Surrounded by his unwavering love, I found the strength to forgive, not just those who had hurt me, but myself too. I embraced the opportunity to heal and build a new life defined not by past mistakes, but by the limitless potential of a redeemed soul. Every step forward became a testament to a truth I had long forgotten. I was a child of light, meant to rise and transform pain into purpose. And so, in that divine encounter, I vowed to honor this second chance. I would rise above the darkness, seek truth relentlessly, and step boldly into a future filled with hope, forgiveness, and eternal redemption. A sudden shift overwhelmed me, as if the very fabric of reality were tearing apart before my eyes. The radiant light surrounding us rippled and pulsed, and I felt myself being pulled into a realm that defied all understanding. My breath caught in my throat, and I gasped as the world began to unravel, not as I had ever known it, but as Jesus saw it. What I witnessed filled me with both awe and an indescribable terror. At first, everything appeared ordinary. I saw sprawling cities stretching endlessly into the night, their lights flickering like distant stars against the dark sky. Streets bustled with people rushing to work, meeting friends, and caring for their families. Life, on the surface, continued as it always had. Yet, beneath this familiar tapestry, I sensed a profound and unsettling wrongness. Then I saw it clearly. Chains. Not chains forged from cold metal, but invisible bonds that wrap themselves around the hearts and minds of everyone. These unseen chains moved like dark tendrils through the air, binding us in ways we could neither see nor understand. A creeping, relentless force whispered into our ears, planting seeds of division, twisting our thoughts and distorting our perceptions of one another. It was as if an ancient power was slowly eroding the very essence of humanity. I couldn't tear my gaze away and found my voice trembling as I asked, "What is this?" In response, Jesus raised his hand, and suddenly I began to hear the whispers clearly. The air thickened with their presence, as if the murmurs seeped into every corner of existence, into bustling streets, quiet homes, busy workplaces. They were not loud, nor did they need to be. Their power lay in their subtle, insidious ability to infiltrate our consciousness, spreading like a silent poison. I distinctly heard the chilling phrases, "You will never be free. They will always see you as less. You must never forgive." These words slithered into the minds of black men, women, and children, etching pain and anger on their faces, a burden they did not deserve, yet felt with every fiber of their being. Then, the whispers shifted their focus. "You are guilty by birth. You must atone for what your ancestors have done. You can never do enough." These declarations sank deep into the hearts of white men and women, burdening them with an unearned shame and a debt that could never be repaid. I watched in horror as this web of lies tore apart relationships. Fathers doubting their sons, mothers distrusting their daughters, and friendships crumbling under relentless suspicion. The more I observed, the clearer it became that this division was not truly about race or background. It was a sinister tool of control, designed to manipulate every aspect of our lives. It pained me to realize that the very thing meant to unite us, our shared humanity, had been twisted into a weapon of separation. As these thoughts swirled in my mind, my own memories surged forth. I recalled moments when I too had listened to these insidious whispers, convinced that the world was against me, that I had no choice but to fight for survival at any cost. The voices had fueled my anger and isolated me further, pushing me into a life of loneliness and despair. Now, seeing the truth laid bare before me, I understood that every ounce of hatred, every shred of division, was nothing more than an illusion, a carefully constructed lie meant to keep us powerless. The sight of these invisible chains and the manipulation they represented left me shaken to my core. I began to feel an overwhelming urge to break free, to shatter the bonds that had long confined us all. I imagined a world where empathy replaced suspicion, where dialogue bridged the gap between hearts once divided by false narratives. In that moment, a spark of hope ignited within me, a determination to reclaim the unity we had lost. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with sorrow and unyielding certainty. His presence banished the deception that had long clouded our vision. "They are not each other's enemies," he said softly. "The real enemy has blinded you all." His words resonated deeply, a clarion call to awaken from the slumber of manipulated division. I knew then that the battle for truth was not fought with violence or hatred, but with the unyielding light of love and understanding. A light that could, one day, shatter even the darkest of chains. I felt my breath hitch as the vision shifted again, as if the very fabric of reality was being redrawn before my eyes. The once familiar cityscape dissolved into a futuristic metropolis, where towering skyscrapers gleamed under a pristine sky, their reflective surfaces stretching upward like giant mirrors into the heavens. The streets were immaculate, laid out with precise symmetry, and every detail of the scene exuded an unsettling sense of perfection. There was no sign of crime, chaos, or poverty. Everything was controlled, too controlled, as if every element of life had been planned down to the last detail. At first glance, it appeared to be a utopia, a place where human life had been refined to its most efficient and harmonious state. Yet, as I observed more closely, a disquieting truth began to emerge from beneath the surface. I noticed that the people moved in unison, their every step synchronized like clockwork. Their eyes were vacant, their faces expressionless. There was no laughter, no questioning, no spark of individuality. It felt as though life itself had been stripped of its soul, replaced by a mechanized existence, devoid of true emotion. Then I began to understand how their lives were governed. Instead of carrying wallets or cash, each person bore a tiny glowing mark beneath their skin, just above their wrists. I watched as a woman stepped into a store, selected a loaf of bread, and simply held her hand over a scanner. With a soft beep, her transaction was completed, a seamless exchange that left no room for human interaction or error. This was not merely convenience, it was a quiet surrender of freedom. Beside me, Jesus spoke quietly. It started as a choice. His tone was gentle, yet beneath it lay an undercurrent of regret and sorrow. I saw flashes of the past in my mind. The implant had once been heralded as a marvel of modern convenience. No more lost credit cards, no more forgotten passwords, no more petty theft. People had embraced it wholeheartedly. But over time, what began as an option slowly morphed into an absolute necessity. It became the sole means of identification, the repository for medical records, and even the key to education and employment. Eventually, it wasn't just an option, it became the law of the land. Those who refused the implant were swiftly ostracized, left to languish on society's fringes. I witnessed desperate families on the outskirts, pleading for mere scraps, their hopes dashed as they were systematically excluded from a modern world that had no place for them. The disparity was stark, a chilling reminder that in the pursuit of perfection, humanity had sacrificed its diversity and freedom. Then, as if to punctuate this grim reality, a man emerged. His commanding presence radiated an almost hypnotic charisma and power, a world leader adored by the masses, promising peace, prosperity, and security. Nations bowed to him, and the people cheered his every word. Yet, beneath his polished exterior, I sensed a dark undercurrent. A sinister force clung to him like a second skin, his eloquent promises masking the chains he was slowly fastening around every soul. "They will not see their chains," Jesus warned, his voice laden with sorrow and urgency, "not until it is too late." His words echoed in my ears as I realized that the price of this so-called perfection was the very essence of our humanity. The vision left me with a deep, unsettling understanding that the path to control was paved with the surrender of individuality, and that even in the brightest light, shadows of oppression lurked, waiting to reclaim the freedom that once defined us. I watched as the world continued spinning, completely blind to its own impending downfall. Everywhere I looked, people believed they were free, waking up each morning, heading to work, and mindlessly scrolling through their devices. They accepted every new change without a moment's hesitation, laughing at warnings, dismissing inconvenient truths as baseless conspiracy theories, and trusting a system that was slowly, imperceptibly enslaving them. I felt a deep sorrow in my heart as I realized how thoroughly the masses had been deceived. "They do not see the bars of their prison," Jesus said softly, his voice filled with sorrow and regret. His words pierced through the facade of normalcy, forcing me to confront a reality that was hidden behind a veneer of comfort and convenience. I began to see how fear and comfort had been wielded as powerful tools of control. People accepted the mark, not because they were coerced, but because they had been conditioned from birth to believe that safety, security, and a promise of a better life were all that mattered. They willingly traded their freedom for a false sense of protection, never realizing the immense cost of their compliance until it was too late. Then, amid this sea of passive acceptance, I saw them, a small but defiant group scattered across the world. These individuals, though lacking power, money, or influence, carried an unyielding fire within them. Society had rejected many of them. They were mocked as fools and branded as outcasts. Forced to live in hiding and secrecy, they had become the silent guardians of truth. Their determination shone like a beacon in the overwhelming darkness of ignorance. "These," Jesus declared, his finger pointing toward them with conviction, "are my warriors." My heart pounded as I observed these resolute souls more closely. They did not fight with swords or guns, but with something far more potent: the truth. In the midst of a society drowning in its own illusions, they spoke out boldly, even when their voices were threatened with silencing. They resisted oppressive forces with every ounce of strength they possessed, refusing to bow even when the world seemed determined to crush them. I watched in awe as the very act of speaking the truth caused the darkness to shudder and recoil, as if burned by a fire it could not withstand. With each person who listened and awakened, I saw the invisible chains that had long bound them begin to snap and fall away. A soft, radiant light started to spread, pushing back the shadows that had so long cloaked our hearts. "They do not know it yet," Jesus said, his gaze fierce and full of power, "but these few will shake the very foundation of the world." In that profound moment, I understood that, despite the overwhelming conformity and ignorance, hope still burned brightly in the hearts of those few brave souls. Their courage, their unwavering commitment to truth, was the spark that could ignite a revolution, one that might eventually free us all from the chains of deception and control. As I continued to reflect on this revelation, a swell of determination took root within me. I realized that I too had a part to play in this unfolding drama of liberation. I remembered the countless nights spent wrestling with despair, the days when the weight of my own mistakes seemed unbearable, yet now I saw that my past did not define me. It was merely a stepping stone toward a higher purpose. The whispers of the oppressed, the silent cries of the forgotten, echoed in my mind, urging me to speak out, to share the light of truth with others. I envisioned a future where dialogue replaced division, where empathy triumphed over fear, and where every individual reclaimed the freedom that was rightfully theirs. In that vision, I saw the seeds of a new society, one built not on control and conformity, but on love, understanding, and the unyielding spirit of resistance. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but the spark of change was undeniable, growing brighter with every awakened heart. And in that moment, I knew that together, even the smallest voices could become a mighty chorus, capable of shattering the walls of oppression and heralding a new dawn for humanity. My chest tightened as I realized just how much I had witnessed, how deeply I had felt. My world had been turned upside down in a matter of moments. Not long ago, I was fleeing from the police, convinced that life was utterly meaningless. And now I had seen the truth laid bare before me. My heart pounded as I stared into the compassionate eyes of Jesus, and I couldn't help but ask, Lord, how can I help them? How can they see? I felt insignificant, a mere street kid who had made mistakes, a kid who had dealt drugs. Yet here I was, entrusted with a truth so vast that the weight of it nearly crushed me. The world around me was lost, blind to the chains that bound it. How could I, with all my shortcomings, possibly awaken people who were so deeply entrenched in their false sense of freedom? Jesus placed a firm yet gentle hand on my shoulder. His touch was both comforting and commanding. "You must tell them," he said, his voice resolute and unwavering. "Some will listen, and some will not, but those who are mine will hear my voice and know the truth." His words reverberated inside me, stirring feelings I had long buried beneath layers of guilt and despair. I swallowed hard, the enormity of the task weighing on me. Would they even listen to me? My mother, my friends, even my community? None of them ever really listened to one another. And here I was, a boy who had been labeled a lost cause, expected to carry a message of hope and truth. Despite my doubts, Jesus' unwavering gaze bolstered my courage. "Speak, Elijah. The truth must be told," he urged. And in that moment, I felt a stirring inside, a force unlike any I had ever encountered. Suddenly, I was enveloped by a powerful presence. It was as if an unseen force had wrapped itself around my very soul. A pull, a command, a calling that I couldn't resist. I knew in an instant what was happening. I was being sent back. Panic gripped me. "No," I gasped, my voice trembling as I clutched desperately at the radiant light and at Jesus' presence. I couldn't bear the thought of returning to that broken world, to the endless pain and despair that had haunted me for so long. "Please, Lord, don't send me back. I don't want to leave you," I cried out, my voice raw with desperation. Jesus' smile was gentle, yet his eyes held a seriousness that pierced through my fear. "Your time is not yet over," he assured me. Slowly, the brilliant light that had once warmed my soul began to fade. The overwhelming feelings of love, warmth, and peace started to ebb away, replaced by a sinking dread. I screamed, "No, please, I can't go back, not without you." But as the world around me collapsed into utter darkness, a crushing weight pressed against my chest. I felt as if I were being squeezed into something too small, too weak, a prison of pain. A sharp, searing agony tore through my ribs, and a deafening noise exploded in my ears. Then, in the midst of that unbearable darkness, I took a desperate gasp. Air flooded into my lungs, and my eyes snapped open to the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. My body was ablaze with pain. Every nerve felt like it was screaming in agony. I heard the incessant beeping of machines, the chaotic shouts of voices, and my mother's anguished sobs. I had returned, I was back, but I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. When I gasped for air, it felt as if I were torn from one realm and hurled into another. My chest throbbed with pain, and my lungs burned, and for a fleeting moment, I questioned if I was truly alive. The harsh, blinding lights above were artificial and cold. Nothing like the radiant, warm glow I had just left behind. Around me, chaos reigned. Machines beeped, footsteps rushed, and overlapping voices created a dissonant symphony. But amidst that turmoil, all I felt was an overwhelming emptiness. I wasn't in his presence anymore. Then a familiar voice broke through the din, raw and desperate. "Elijah, baby, oh my God, Elijah!" My mother's cry pierced my haze. With difficulty, I turned my head, each movement making my skull throb. There she was, gripping my hand tightly, tears streaming down her face as she pressed her forehead against my knuckles. I longed to tell her everything, to say that I had seen him, that I had been with Jesus, but my throat was parched, my lips cracked, and all that emerged was a whisper, "Mama." I saw him. Her head snapped up, swollen eyes searching mine in disbelief. What? What are you saying?" she demanded. "I saw Jesus," I insisted, my voice barely audible amid the sterile clamor of the hospital. The room fell into a strained silence. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances while the doctor muttered about impossible vitals, as if trying to rationalize a miracle. My mother's face softened from relief to cautious concern. "Baby, you've been through so much. You hit your head really bad. You were gone for almost 5 minutes. You probably just had a dream." I shook my head, desperation rising. "No, Mama, it was real. He showed me everything." Memories surged back, visions of chains of deception, the enemy's false promises, and the slow, insidious technological enslavement that gripped the world. I had seen the plan unfolding, how people were being lured into darkness while believing they walked toward light. But who would believe me? Not the doctors, not my friends who mocked me, and certainly not the pastor who dismissed my experience as just another near-death hallucination. I clenched my fists in silent rage. They couldn't see it. They couldn't feel what I had felt. Then, amidst the quiet despair, I heard his voice again. Not in the room, but deep within my soul. Some will listen, some will not. But those who are, mine will hear my voice. Suddenly, I began noticing subtle signs everywhere. Technology was creeping into every facet of life. Contactless payments, biometric scans, microchip implants promoted as the future of convenience. News outlets stirred division, pitting people against each other while distracting them from a real, hidden battle. And slowly, the world was changing. People were beginning to accept what they once fought against, dismissing it as progress. I knew then that my mission was not to convince everyone. I had been sent back for a reason. Even if my words fell on deaf ears, they were meant for those who truly needed to hear them. I couldn't let others be led blindly into a trap, while I had been shown the truth. At first, doubt gnawed at me. Why would Jesus choose someone like me? I had spent so many years ignoring him, rejecting his guidance, and breaking every rule I knew. But every time I questioned it, flashes of my near-death experience returned. The boundless love in his eyes, the sorrow in his voice when he revealed the deception, and the weight of the truth he had placed upon me. That vision, that divine encounter, was not just a dream. It was my calling. Determined, I began speaking to anyone who would listen. I reached out to old friends still trapped in the vicious cycle of street life. I told them about the danger ahead, about the insidious plans of those in power, and about how we were being conditioned to accept our own enslavement. Most scoffed, some laughed outright, and others simply walked away. But even if only a few paused to truly listen, it would be enough. I pleaded with my mother again, my voice laced with urgency. "Mama, you must believe me. Things are happening, and soon we won't have a choice. You have to trust me." With sad eyes and a gentle touch, she reassured me, "Baby, I trust you. Just focus on getting better." But this wasn't just about recovery. It was about awakening. I began writing down everything I had seen, every warning, every prophecy, every detail Jesus had shared with me. If the world wouldn't listen now, perhaps one day When the signs became undeniable, they would remember my words. As governments pushed for digital IDs and cash vanished, and as artificial intelligence seeped into every decision, I knew the battle for truth had only just begun. My mission wasn't to force the truth upon the world, but to plant the seeds of awareness. Because those who truly belong to Him will always hear His voice, and in time, they will understand. I was no longer the frightened boy who had run from the police that night. I had been chosen, and nothing, no disbelief, no mockery, no doubt, could silence the truth I now carried within me. If you are reading these words, understand this: it is not a coincidence. There are no coincidences in a world where spiritual forces are at war. Every moment, every decision, every piece of truth you encounter is an invitation, a calling to choose between deception and reality, between blindness and sight, between darkness and light. Right now, at this very moment, you stand at a crossroads. You have two choices. You can continue down the path the world has paved for you, a path of comfort, conformity, and unquestioning obedience. You can believe what they tell you, that everything is under control, that technology is only here to help, that division is natural, that morality is fluid, that truth is relative. You can trust in the promises of governments, of corporations, of leaders who claim they have your best interests at heart. You can close your eyes to the warning signs, convincing yourself that those who sound the alarm are simply paranoid. You can keep moving forward, step by step, until one day you wake up and realize you are no longer free. But by then, it will be too late. Or you can wake up. You can recognize the deception that is unfolding before your very eyes. You can see the invisible chains being placed on humanity, chains of control disguised as convenience, chains of slavery disguised as security. You can understand that the world is not merely evolving, but is being manipulated, shaped into something that was foretold long ago. You can realize that this is not about race, politics, or power. It is about the battle for your soul. And in that moment, you can make the only choice that truly matters. You can turn to Jesus Christ, because only He has the power to set you free. Only He can give you the wisdom to see through the lies. Only He can protect you when the world demands your allegiance to something far darker than you ever imagined. The deception will not stop. It will only grow stronger, more persuasive, more inescapable. It will convince people that resistance is foolish, that standing firm is dangerous, that rejecting the system is impossible. It will lead the world into worshiping a false savior, into accepting chains they cannot see, into embracing destruction disguised as salvation. But those who belong to Him, those who know His voice, will not be deceived. They will stand in the light even as the darkness consumes everything around them. They will endure when the world tells them to bow. They will refuse to take the easy path, no matter the cost. The question now is, which path will you take? If this message resonates with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing these powerful stories and creating a space for open, heartfelt conversations. Click the notification bell so you're always updated when we post new content. Together, let's explore the unseen, celebrate the miraculous, and inspire one another to live with love, faith, and wonder.